Hey guys, this is Lizzie from Little Spoon Miniatures. Today I'll be showing you how to make this cute brick foundation for your dollhouse. I am using this 1mm thick self-adhesive cork material I got on Amazon. I forgot to get a shot of the packaging before I unwrapped it, but I will put a link in the description box. I like this because it has a nice texture that's good for little bricks, and also because it has an adhesive material on the back, so that you don't have to glue a million tiny bricks all over your dollhouse. This process is tedious enough without having to do that. So I have taped it down to my cutting mat, otherwise it sort of wiggles around a little too much and you wind up getting really wonky bricks. Take your straight edge, and we're going to be marking 1/4 inch columns all the way across. I usually do this right away with my exacto knife, but that doesn't really show up on camera, so if you don't have an exacto knife or you just prefer to use scissors, marking it with a pen and pencil is an easy way to go. Once you've marked enough columns, go ahead and cut your sheet. This just gives us an easier width of material to work with, and it also allows us to see the guidelines on our cutting mat. Now we're going to take our straight edge and mark 3/4 of an inch all the way across. This gives us bricks that are 1/4 by 3/4 of an inch. Do be sure to count your increments as you move your straight edge. I ruined quite a few bricks by accidentally marking at the 1/2 inch or the 1 inch mark, so please learn from my mistakes. Count carefully as you go so that each brick is exactly 3/4 of an inch wide. Once you've made all your marks, cut out along one column of your brick material. Now cut out your bricks. I did wind up rubbing off a little bit of my pen ink as I was cutting it out, so I wound up skipping a few. Peel off the tape as you go, very carefully so you don't pull up any of the cork material. After you cut off your bricks, you're going to take your scissors and carefully nip off one tiny corner at each side of the brick. This gives the bricks a nice, natural, worn look. And yes, you're going to have to do this for each individual brick you just cut, as well as all the ones still on your sheet that you haven't cut out. It's a pain, but it looks really good. Once you're done, you should have a pile of bricks, something like this. Now we're going to go over to our dollhouse. I have this little measuring device dealie with a slidey guide. I have marked it at 5/16 of an inch. Our bricks are 1/4 inch, so this gives us about 1/16 of an inch gap in between. Bring it up to your dollhouse, leave the guide level with the base of the foundation, and use your pencil to mark a line. Do the same on the other side. Now, take a straight edge and connect the two marks. I tried using my plastic rulers, but they slipped and slid all over the place, so I wound up using a piece of trim scrap that was left over. Make sure that it's really level, and then use your pencil to mark a line all the way across. Then I slid my guide another 5/16 of an inch for a total of 5/8 of an inch if I'm doing my math right. I had to count as I went because the marks are so small. Yeah, that looks about right. Yeah, we're gonna call that good. Okay. Hold the guide level with the bottom of your dollhouse foundation again. And do the same process we did it earlier. Mark the height on each side. And connect it with a straight edge. Then we're going to slide it up again. And just continue this all the way across. I marked each line before drawing it in, just so that I wouldn't have to keep putting my ruler down, picking up my straight edge, putting down my ruler, picking up my straight edge, over and over. And then draw your lines. I wound up with 8 rows. You may have more or less depending on the height of your foundation. Now take all those beautiful bricks we cut out earlier. Very carefully peel the backing off. It helps if you have some slightly longer fingernails to get this process started. Line up the bottom of your brick with the bottom of the foundation and the edge of your brick with the edge. Make sure you push your brick firmly into the surface so it sticks. The second row should start with a half brick to make it look realistic, so take your scissors and carefully cut one brick roughly in half. We now have 2 pieces that are about 3/8 of an inch wide. Peel off the backing and stick the half brick on with the cut edge on the edge of the foundation and the bottom level with the marking line that you drew. The glue on these bricks is pretty good. You can reposition it once or twice if you get it a little bit off of where you want it. It will lose its stickiness eventually, so try and get it right the first time if possible. Now we can take the second half of our brick, peel off the backing. We're going to skip a row. That row will have a whole brick, and again place it with the cut edge on the edge of our foundation and the bottom level with the marking line. I like to mark these vertical bricks first just so that I don't have to mess with my scissors too often during this process. We fill in a whole brick in between the 2 halves, and then just continue that way up the edge of our foundation. Now we start filling in our rows. Simply peel the backing off your brick, stick it in line with the other bricks in the row. Leave a small gap in between them that we will fill with mortar later. This gap is roughly 1/16 of an inch so that it matches the gap in between the rows. Continue all the way across. This row ended with a whole brick, which was nice. Most of your rows will require a little bit of trimming in order to get the look right, so I'm going to show you how we do that. Just fill in your bricks all the way across until you get to the edge. we need a small brick or a partial brick to fill in this gap right here. You can place it and then cut it with scissors if you want. I've found that that is a little too much work and it winds up giving you a brick that's never quite exactly the right size. So I found it's easiest to peel the backing off of the brick. Again, helps to have nails to get this started. And then you press it down firmly into place, just like you did with all the others in the row. You want to make sure it's really on there or else it'll wiggle around while you're cutting it and you won't get clean lines. Once it's pressed down, you're going to take your exacto knife or craft knife, whatever you're using. I'm using this red fold-out razor knife. Press down with the edge of your foundation and slowly cut down. Peel away the excess and your row is done. Alright, now that we've got all our bricks in place, I'm going to be sealing it with a very thin coat of watered down PVA glue or white glue. This just keeps the brick or the corkboard from absorbing too much of the paint in the next step. You want to make sure it's a really thin coat, otherwise you'll fill in the texture and you'll lose that lovely, texture. Leave this to dry completely. Now that that's done, we're going to be coating it with a thin layer of white paint. This is just actual house paint that I got at Home Depot. It's the same color that I used on the trim in the dollhouse as well as a few other places on the exterior. Again, you just want to make sure that it's a light coat so you don't lose all the texture, just enough to give it a base of color so that you don't have to layer on a whole bunch after you've put the mortar in place. Use tiny amounts at a time. Make sure you cover the whole surface of the brick. You don't want to get too much buildup in between. Again, leave this to dry completely before you begin the next step. Say hi to my helper cat. Her name is Panda. She's an excellent snuggler and an all-around spectacular fuzzy assistant. Alright, the next step is to create our mortar. I'm going to be using this spackle from DAP called Drydex. It goes on pink and is white when it dries. It should actually be much more pink than it appears in the video, but my tube is kind of old and I think it's a little bit dried out. You can also use the kind that comes in a tub, but I've found that the squeezy tip does a much better job of getting the spackle where I need it to go, and I don't have to scrape off quite so much excess. Squeeze it into the rows, or the gaps between the rows rather. You can use a tool if you want to squish it in. I've actually found that a slightly damp finger is the most effective way to smear it around and to wipe it off the places where you don't want it. You want to go over each horizontal line and use your finger to press the excess down into the vertical lines. If you use enough pressure when you're rubbing across, it will also force some of the spackle down in between the bricks, so you don't have to bother squeezing the spackle into each vertical line. You want to make sure that you rub fairly hard so that you get it deep in between each of the bricks, and also so that you don't have a lot on any of the flat surfaces. Again, this will just fill in That would fill in too much of that cork texture and you would lose the unique look. Once I had it squished in everywhere I wanted it, I went over it with a rag just to make sure I got it off all the faces of the bricks, and then I left it to dry completely. The next step is to add texture. I'm using the back of an exacto knife, but you can use anything pointy that will fit in the gaps, such as a needle tool or a dental pick. You just want to gently scrape, make some zigzags, anything that will make it look like real mortar. You don't have to go super deep, that won't look very realistic. You want to go over every vertical and horizontal line of mortar that you made. Once I had made all my texture, I went over it with a soft brush, just to wipe off any dust and excess that was left behind. Do this very gently so you don't accidentally scrape away too much. The final step is to add another coat of the white paint that we used earlier. Again, a thin coat, because you just spent all that time making the texture for the mortar, you don't want to fill it in. Make sure you get between every single brick so that it's all one color. And there you have it. A miniature brick texture, for your dollhouse foundation. This also looks great as a chimney, a fireplace, walls, paths, anywhere that you think a little brick texture might enhance the beauty of your miniatures. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next tutorial.